On Halloween in 1976, José María Gutiérrez Hernández was born in Torrejón de Ardoz, a municipality belonging to the community of Madrid. In a city divided by its football, the local boy decided his affiliation from early, determined to one day sport the famed strip of Los Blancos, in spite of his upbringing as a Barcelona fan. At 8 years old, he took his first steps on this journey, joining Real Madrid's youth academy La Fábrica with the intent of being a striker. It was a formative decade for the youngster, conquering every step within Madrid's youth structure and picking up high praise from the coaches along the way. Off the back of a strong season with the C team, a long-awaited call-up to the first team was offered his way, and at the tender age of 19, the Spaniard made his La Liga and Santiago Bernabeu debut in December 1995. Under Jorge Valdano, Guti gradually edged his way into the starting setup, concluding the campaign as a regular feature and even managing to score versus Real Valladolid in May 96. At this time, in the mid-90s, Los Blancos was very much a homegrown team, as Guti was one of 9 who had come through the academy. Unfortunately, he had taken his place in the first team at a tumultuous time for Real, who suffered their lowest league finish in 19 years. During this plagued season, the club's president resigned because of the institution's poor financial state, and the board had appointed 2 different managers due to form. Los Merengues were in complete disarray by the summer. However, under their 4th manager in 12 months, all was quickly put back into gear. With no involvement in Europe, Fabio Capello was able to focus entirely on the domestic competitions and look to bolster the squad with the likes of Davor Schuster in attack and a youthful Clarence Seedorf to fortify the midfield. The 20-year-old Dutchman was already a European champion and massively outranked Guti, and hence his features were reduced to sporadic off-the-bench appearances. Annoyingly, when he came on, he was often a reliable asset to Madrid in the centre of the park, but couldn't shift Fernando Redondo or Luis Milla from Capello's regular team sheet. With 350 on-pitch minutes across 14 appearances in the white shirt, his contribution was hardly critical, but Los Blancos had been reignited by the former Milanista, who guided them to narrow victory over the Catalans in La Liga. Capello's departure after just 1 year in the Bernabeu hindered their league form, failing to reclaim the title in 98, yet the squad was now established and the emphasis was set to Europe. On their return to the ultimate club competition, the unaltered squad found themselves in the Champions League final with Juventus, and Guti, who had only played 32 minutes on the road to the match, spectated from the sidelines as the Royal Whites bettered the Bianconeri with a single goal inside the 90. Though he had not been at the heart of it, Guti had enjoyed overwhelming success in such a short span that only continued across the upcoming months. In December, the Intercontinental Cup was added to his growing list of accolades midway through a season that the Spaniard had seen far more action under Guus Hiddink. Into the new year, the 22-year-old became even more involved. Hiddink's reign, however, didn't last much of 1999, as certain public remarks demeaning the board and its management of club finances forced him out. John Toshak, his replacement, took little time to return Guti to the bench as he resumed his role as an impact sub. Nevertheless, with 36, he had set a personal best for appearances in a season and was subsequently rewarded with a chance to debut for his nation's senior team in May. On Christmas Eve, the opening Guti desired was left with the departure of Seedorf, who returned to Italy and Nerazzurro, having become less prominent in the starting setup. It was the start of the new millennium, and Guti was now tasked with replacing the tireless Dutchman. The Spaniard was completely unlike Seedorf. his work rate often underwhelmed, and as implied by his past as a striker, was far more of a presence in the offence than someone to intercept and break up play. Vicente del Bosque valued Guti's versatility, deploying him everywhere across the midfield when needed, and though he struggled to fit in the Seedorf-shaped hole, an impressive 9 La Liga goals were contributed by him, mainly from the left of midfield. Prone to lashing out, however, Guti also had flawed moments, sent off for a second time in just 3 months against Barcelona for a repeated moment of red mist that cost the 23-year-old at times. After an active year, Guti's appearances slowed from April as Real charged towards another Champions League final, dependent on European success given their 5th place domestic finish. Scouse new boy Steve McManaman was able to slither his way onto Del Bosque's team sheet after a string of stellar performances again in Guti's stead. In the all-Spanish concluder, Los Blancos were pitted against Valencia, for which the midfielder wasn't even in the squad, budged from the middle of the park by Raúl. Expectedly, Madrid were dominant over the underdogs, putting 3 past them to be crowned champions of Europe for a record 8th time.
Second UEFA Champions League title in 3 seasons.
Continuing this personally bittersweet summer, the number 14 was excluded from Spain's Euro 2000 squad before the arrival of Florentino Perez, the new club president, whose promised ambition for success came with the implication of change. It turned out that the budget for which was 122 million euros that the engineer splashed on 6 players, including Luis Figo and Claude Makelele, crowding the centre of Madrid's park. Guti could have easily been deterred by this, but Del Bosque's faith in him sustained, which the graduate repaid in the following year when an injury hit Morientes at the start of the 2000-2001 season. With just 1 Spanish season under his belt, Nicolas Anelka returned to Paris, leaving few striking options. Thus Guti reverted to a forward, and, in a role that naturally suited him, the Spaniard enjoyed his finest spell yet. Trusted to adapt from game to game, Guti blossomed from September as an attacking midfielder. Second striker to Raúl, his scoring exploits continued on a consistent basis, proving to be a clinical finisher as well as an able supplier for the number 7.
And on to Luis Figo, onside 2-0, fabulous goal by Real Madrid.
Amongst his prolific tally that eventually grew to 18 across all competitions was a home hat-trick to beat Villarreal, 1 goal of which is broadly regarded his career's most spectacular. His quality was finally being seen to the max, and with his temperament seemingly under control, Del Bosque rewarded Guti with the captain's armband for 5 matches inside the 9 months. Deportivo La Coruña couldn't catch the Kings of Europe, who secured the top spot for a 28th time, much to the help of Guti, who had been a mainstay of a star-studded outfit. When shining his brightest, another dimmer was set in the form of Zinedine Zidane, the world's greatest playmaker at the time, for whose services Perez shelled out a world record fee. Surely a bitter pill to swallow, the Ballon d'Or winner displaced Guti as Madrid's Enganche in behind the centre forwards, and yet again the 14 was demoted to the all too familiar bench. Limited to merely 9 league starts, it was hard to establish a rhythm, affecting his output, while Zizou matched high expectations. On the other hand, the Copa del Rey was very much Guti's competition that season, bagging 6 goals in 7 matches to claim the title of the top scorer. The local boy was also a useful asset in Europe, starting 5 group stage matches with a pair of goals and assists to his name. A late goal was added by Guti in the quarters versus Bayern Munich, netted inside the 9 minutes he spent on the pitch, earning starts in both legs of the El Clasico semis. Boosted by the historic national importance of the derby, the forward was reliable and tough home and away, featuring for over 80 minutes in each to aid Los Blancos in reaching their third Champions League final in 5 years. For the game in Glasgow, Del Bosque became another to break Guti's heart, deciding against his participation in favour of Morientes. Tied 1-1 by the 15th minute, Zidane, with one kick of the ball, proved his worth and demonstrated to all the golfing quality between he and the competition, including Guti. His third final and a third win, all without contributing a single second of game time. Still, he was only 25, and with a rising global status, the skillful maestro threatened to develop into one of the game's real megastars. Another humbling summer was to come. After being overlooked again for the World Cup, Real decided to put forth a hefty bid for the tournament's star. Inter's Ronaldo, with the golden ball under his arm and a winner's medal around his neck, had proved he was still at that prestige level despite the knee injuries and operation he'd underwent. Now firmly into the era of the Galácticos, odds were stacked against Guti, fighting for a place against another Ballon d'Or winner. To accommodate for these frontline world beaters, he was dropped deeper to take up a spot in the mid. Still fairly prolific, he readjusted with ease, providing 15 assists, as well as converting another 13 himself across 54 appearances. Guti's grafting throughout one of his finest campaigns was vital in returning Real to domestic league glory under Del Bosque, who controversially was not offered a contract renewal. Another ego entered the dressing room that July, prompting the in-form Guti to vent his frustrations. All the doors are closing in on me. I was improving as a midfielder and Zidane arrived. I was improving as a forward and Ronaldo arrived. I'm now in the national team as a midfielder and Beckham comes. Historic correlations between the two blondes have been identified. Guti was once seen as Spain's answer to Beckham, given his vision and passing ability, as well as similarity in loyalty to their boyhood clubs. Here was another threat to his game time, and one that he happened to dislike, but Guti's place was not compromised to account for Beckham, helped by the departure of Makelele. Carlos Queiroz shared the managerial belief in Guti, and given the goodbyes of long-term skipper Fernando Hierro, Raul was promoted to lead the team, while the midfielder was made vice. Still a regular of the 11, he held his central role, while also able to exercise his usefulness from wider positions on either flank, much like a Swiss army knife who coaches could use for any given scenario. Though he had finally uncovered a sense of stability in the first team, the club were in relative disarray. Queiroz was sacked after a trophyless 9 months. New signings Michael Owen and Walter Samuel were in and out after just one season, and Perez resigned in February 2006, acknowledging the team's need for redirection. One of the best man-for-man teams ever assembled had crumbled, falling flat both domestically and in Europe, for which the avaricious owners should take blame, overly focused on marketing the Real Madrid brand instead of investing in defensive talent. Occasional moments of brilliance during this mid-2000s period helped define Guti's genius, the most notable of which came in 2006. Sevilla, for whom Guti often saved his best performances, visited the Bernabeu for a standard league fixture. Captaining Los Blancos, the playmaker produced one of the greatest backheeled assists you could hope to see. The pair combined again in the dying moments to put the nail in the coffin as the Frenchman struck home his third of the night, which would turn out to be his first and final hat-trick in the white shirt. Now 34, Zidane retired, and Ronaldo signed with the Rossoneri soon after, marking the breaking of the original Galácticos. Guti's future with Real seemed further insecure when Atletico looked to drag him across Madrid and into the jersey of Los Blancos. The loyal 30-year-old may have been tempted, but wasn't convinced, and negotiations fell through across the board. The number 5's exit created an opening in the offensive midfield where Guti could flex all his muscles in his preferred position. His awareness, range of passing, goal-scoring ability and close control in support of Ruud van Nistelrooy and Raul won him favour with Fabio Capello, who returned to the Bernabeu, and the Italian gave Guti the trust he needed to thrive. With Calderon's endorsement, Capello cited the Spaniard as the centre around whom the team would be built, aiming to unlock the raw potential that was the eternal promise of Guti. With more emphasis placed on providing them finishing, his second half of 2006-07 was an example of the 14 at his peak, specifically with his May showing off the bench versus the Andalusians. Handed 32 minutes to help his losing side crawl their way back into the match and strengthen their position at the top of the table, he took merely 5 to neatly thread the Dutch marksman through for an equaliser. Then, using his unique vision, he freed space in the box for Robinho to plunder the lead. This brief cameo had revitalised Los Merengues, exuding the confidence and class reminiscent of the man whose boots he was trying to fill. This unforgettable performance proved the importance of Guti, especially when Real went on to collect the title later that month. Nevertheless, the glimpses of wonder were all too rare, causing doubt in the staff. The stock that the former England manager had placed in the midfielder was unfortunately misdirected, as he came to realise Guti was not the appropriate figure to pilot his team. Other than his lethargic attitude when selected to start, he was prone to losing his temper, making his hot head a major obstacle for Capello. Even with the return of Spanish silverware, Don Capello was criticised for his retrograde and frankly boring approach, for which he was consequently sacked in June 2007. It had been under he that Guti seemed richer in small doses. However, this was flipped on its head from the commencement of Bernd Schuster's tenure in the capital. The German cast Guti in the protagonist role he'd desired since first donning the jersey, and the style of Capello was juxtaposed completely by the former European champion, returning a fast-paced, attacking way to the Bernabeu. Guti was allotted the chance to be at the very heart of this approach, breaking a personal best for most La Liga starts ever in a season, during which the 14 reached his pinnacle with an exceptional output of 18 assists. By now, many knew the elite level he was capable of, but the jaw-dropping passes, exquisite touches and commanding on-ball presence really showcased what had been overshadowed by the Galácticos. In February 2008, Real Valladolid bore the pain of a humiliating 7-0 dismantling, to which the 14 was instrumental, delivering a hat-trick of assists and netting a brace. Schuster's group extended Real's run of domestic dominance, albeit a short-lived celebration. Shedding talent that they couldn't aptly replace, 2008-09 was a rough bunch of months to be a Madridista, crashing out of Europe early on, switching up managers mid-season, and though able to maintain an unbeaten run for 4 months, their historic Catalan rivals trumped them across the board with a humbling treble. Real hadn't reached even the quarter-finals of the Champions League now for half a decade. A demand for change echoed throughout the city. In the new year of 2009, Calderon decided to resign, prompting the presidential reinstatement of Perez. 24 hours after the news broke, Manuel Pellegrini was announced as the manager-to-be, prior to one of the greatest spending sprees in history. The 61-year-old continued with the policy pursued during his first term, finalising the purchase of Kaká for €65 million, setting a record transfer fee that was duly broken in the same window by Cristiano Ronaldo, for whom Real dropped over €90 million. Adding the likes of Xabi Alonso and Arbeloa completed the squad's overhaul, hinting that this was the beginning of the end for Guti. 33, and with younger, world-class competition spread generously throughout the dressing room, he still managed to impose himself in the earlier stage of the campaign. Bragging 2 successive matches in which he'd both scored and assisted to help Los Blancos to whitewash victories, he reportedly insulted Pellegrini when brought off at half-time during their shock defeat in the first round of the Copa del Rey, for which the Chilean temporarily cut Guti from the squad, a ban lasting from October to next January. Vintage Guti came to play upon his return, with a moment that immortalised him as a cult hero. Running into a one-on-one, he was fed through by the Brazilian, set up to shoot on his weaker right foot, but he instead backheeled the ball into the path of Karim Benzema, described by the Spanish paper Marca as the backheel of God. One of the fleeting moments that encapsulated his genius to a T, it was sadly his final hurrah in the white shirt, sustaining an injury in the spring, but Kaká's infamous knee problems overlapped, clearing space in the centre for the Spaniard to feature in every fixture across the lasting weeks of the competition. That July, Guti came across an offer from Beşiktaş of the Turkish Super League, looking for his signature on a 2-year contract. Since entering his 30s, advances from other clubs had become more of a rarity for the playmaker, and given the appointment of disciplinarian Jose Mourinho, on top of the influx of chic midfielders, negotiations moved along in favour of the Middle Eastern club. Guti was convinced a day later by Bernd Schuster, who was the manager of the Black Eagles at the time, and after nearly 25 years of service to his beloved boyhood club, all parties put pen to paper. Farewells were bid, and the long-standing Madridista began his Turkish term with an epic presentation at the Inonu Stadium. Fans were overjoyed by the news, aware fully that this was an excellent acquisition for a club of their size, who had starred alongside some of the game's greats. The marquee names displays at the early stage were strong, easily adjusting to the lower level and getting on the score sheet to help overcome Istanbul rivals Galatasaray in November. Still, in keeping with the double life led throughout his career, Guti's admirable form was countered by his extracurricular activities, which, as time went on, became problematic. Alone in the spotlight for the first time, he took full advantage of his local celebrity, and he quickly developed a glamorous Istanbul lifestyle. Talk shows, newspapers, paparazzi, Guti was a huge name, and he knew it all too well, gradually driven to distraction from the pitch, and his form waned. Funnily enough, with Beşiktaş, Guti achieved the one piece of silverware that he couldn't in a quarter of a century with Real, a domestic cup, which they collected in May 2011 after a penalty shootout. The German's resignation 2 months prior was bound to fully derail Guti, as he was deemed a spare part by the replacement Carlos Carvajal, whose demands for hard training and complete focus were not answered by the unwilling Spaniard. In the winter of 2011, Guti travelled back to his homeland and failed to attend training, to the outrage of the coaches, board and eventually the owner, who terminated his contract on the 15th of November, dropping the curtain on his 17-year senior career. An enigma, even to the end, Guti's sporting tale is hardly an unfamiliar one, but nevertheless a true shame. From the narrow streets of Madrid to a publicly known millionaire in his early 20s, it's impossible to imagine the challenges of pressure and all that come with being a Real Madrid starlet, particularly if you're as gifted as he was. Breathtaking passes became his forte, leaving defenders for dead with ingenious passes on either foot. Even able to individually turn a match around from midfield, at Guti's best, he could justify both the entry fee and his grotesque wage. With these positives come a level of arrogance, and Guti had that in abundance. He knew how great he was and thus demanded the centre of attention in every situation, on or off the pitch. The post-Galáctico coaches that came seeking to unlock the midfielder either failed and gave up, or succeeded for a short time until the president intervened with a gluttony of new signings to replace and thus discourage the informed Guti. Seen as a jack of all trades, his best position remained a mystery for years. Prolific as a striker, dependable at the base of midfield, and capable patrolling the wings, his ability to modify on call is a testament to his world-class talent. Yet, this should have earned Guti the responsibility of mastering one position instead of just letting him plateau as a factotum, especially given his undying loyalty to the club. The wildness of his character was reflected on the pitch. Often a recipient of a card, Guti's temper was easily lost. He embodied both longevity and devotion to the Bernabeu, but when burdened with the job of superficially embracing these pricey stars who had been brought in to steal his place, the divisive Spaniard wasn't always the most hospitable. Owen and McManaman have named him the vainest player they'd met, while his relationship with Beckham was fractious from the start. The understated tragedy of his career was his lack of international caps, winning only 13 in 6 years with the seniors, and never appearing in a World Cup or European Championship for Spain. In his prime just before the 2008 blooming of the squad, the timing is unfortunate, as the similarly skilled likes of Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets and Alonso came just after and won it all. A genius, a maverick, a libertine, Guti was easy to love and equally rather easy to hate. Unpredictable in all aspects, he was a master at his pinnacle and a petulant playboy at his worst, who, with all his histrionics, was still able to accumulate a selfish wealth of silverware and earn an induction into Real Madrid's Hall of Fame. Should you have offered this future to an 8-year-old in Madrid's cantera, whose fantasies revolve around the Bernabeu, you would walk away armless. So to call him a failure, as many have, would be mistaken. Nonetheless, the world should certainly have seen far more consistency from a man who O Fenomeno described during his time in the Spanish capital as the Galáctico's finest talent.